So you want to move out to the woods and start yourself an off-grid homestead so you can live that life. But you've never bought land before and you don't want to make a bunch of these mistakes that you're terrified you're gonna make. There is some solid advice out there from creators like Wayne Turner and Better Together Homestead on the mistakes to avoid when buying raw land. I actually linked a couple of my favorites down in the description. But if you're watching my channel, you're probably trying to go about this whole acquiring land on more of a shoestring budget than going a more conventional bank loan, using a realtor, maybe even paying cash sort of a scenario. So in this video, I'm gonna go over a slightly different perspective and share with you the 5 biggest mistakes that I see people make when they're trying to acquire cheap land. I actually made the first one of these, and it set our homestead back by years. But if you stick around to the end, knowing about the last one might just save your life. So, let's talk about it. Mistake number 1, having no earthly idea how far down you're gonna have to drill to hit water. When we first bought our property, we were so wrapped up in the problems that we were trying to solve by coming out here that we didn't really take into consideration some of the more practical things. For example, access to water. We got here, we were just absolutely in love with the beauty of the area. And then when it came time to start doing things like getting quotes for drilling a well, we found out that a well here is almost 400 feet deep. What does it cost to drill a well in this area with all that stuff?
There is probably going to charge you around $50,000 for a 400-foot hole or something like that.
50,000, which is almost 3 times what we paid for the property in the first place. So you carry the one. It's a little bit more than I was expecting to hear. Now, over the years, we've made it work. We've done rainwater collection. We even, for years, would drive down to a local campsite and fill up 5-gallon water jugs every other day just to take care of our basic water needs. Now, this has been inconvenient at times, but where it's really set us back is the fact that it has cut the total amount of food that we can produce for ourselves here down significantly over what we thought we'd be able to grow for ourselves at this point. So, how do you avoid this problem? Well, it's pretty simple. Talk to the neighbors and find out how deep their wells are. Another good way would be to call the county, and if you're really nice to the people that you get a hold of down there because they're used to people calling in and complaining, you can probably get them to pull 3 or 4 of the well permits around here and get the water report and find out exactly how deep their wells were when they hit water. And then you can put each one of those locations on a topographical map. You can actually average those numbers out and find out how deep that well is probably going to be. That's probably your most accurate way of figuring it out. Then you can call back that well driller and give them that information and find out how much putting a well on that property is actually going to cost you. It might change your whole opinion about that property. If you can stick to between 250 and 300 feet down, there are well drilling rigs that you can buy for a couple of grand that'll drill 250 to 300 feet down. And if you're the DIY type, you can probably take care of that yourself. You just need to know what those numbers are before you sign on the dotted line. Otherwise, you might be left high and dry. That was a knee slapper. Mistake number 2, buying the wrong type of land. Mistake number 2 is one that I see all the time. People will go out to a piece of property and just fall in love with the aesthetics of it and fail to ask themselves one of the more important questions, which is, what am I actually planning to do with this land? People get all caught up in the beauty of the land and fail to recognize the utility of it. Having a clear purpose and goals worked out for what you want to actually do with the property before you even think about going out and buying some is super important. Not only will it save you thousands of dollars, but potentially years of frustration as well. Do you want livestock? Do you want to grow crops? What kind of crops? Do you want to put in a roller skating rink? Or maybe you want to just put together a beautiful retreat for people to come and do goat yoga. The type of land you need for livestock is pretty different from the type of land that you would need to be able to maximize crop yields. And different from both of those would be the type of land you'd need for a yoga retreat. So do your research on the type of land that you need for the activity that you want to accomplish. This will greatly narrow your search parameters, making it less overwhelming to actually identify land that might work for you, but it'll also save you just mountains of heartache. When you put all this work into finding land, you acquire it, you get out to it, and then you find out that you can't really accomplish the thing that you set out to accomplish in the first place. Now here's a pro tip on this one. Perfect is the enemy of the good in this particular subject. You have to remember that there is a lot that can be done to land to turn it into what you need it to be, so long as the basic elements are there. Everybody seems to want to end up with a Bob Ross painting without really taking into consideration the fact that even Bob Ross started out with the blank canvas. Don't let the fear of making this particular mistake trigger analysis paralysis and let that prevent you from moving forward with accomplishing your goal. I've done a ton out here with a rake and a shovel and a pickaxe. Was the land ideal for what I wanted it for? No, not at all. But we've made huge strides in turning it into what we need it to be. With a little bit of that right there. Yeah, oh, right there. That was meant to describe muscle, sweat, elbow grease. Mistake number 3, the essential services are too far away. This third mistake will drain your bank account and whatever remnants of sanity that you have left at this point faster than almost anything else. If the places that you have to go to get the things that you need to survive are too far away, with the price of gas these days and all the other things that go into traveling hours to buy the things that you need, that's not a good situation for you to be in. Look, you're gonna need gasoline or diesel. That's just science. Until you get to a point where you grow all of your own food on your property, you're gonna need access to a market to buy meat, grains, protein, vegetables, Pop-Tarts, chicken nuggets, soda pops. These are all like necessities. And so if it's too far away, let me tell you, that can create problems for you. You're gonna need a lumber yard, more than likely, a hardware store, occasional fast food, perhaps a Panda Express. I don't know. Whatever it is that you consider to be a necessity, you're gonna wanna make sure that there are those things within a relatively tolerable travel radius from your property. You'll probably wanna have a doctor's office relatively close, or a hospital for an emergency within a traveling distance, preferably not so far away that if you had a relatively deep gash, you don't bleed out on the way there. The question is, how far is too far? And that's something you're gonna have to figure out for yourself. For example, we live about 45 minutes away from a town that's big enough to justify having a Walmart supercenter. We go there every couple of weeks to get supplies and the things that we need, so it's not an everyday trip. So 45 minutes away isn't too far away for us to be able to have access to that thing at a frequency of once every 2 weeks. But there's a gas station about 15 minutes away. There's a Dollar General that just randomly spawned out of nowhere in the middle of nothing 12, 14 minutes away. That's really convenient, just in case, I run out of raspberry-filled powdered donuts. They're my thing, so sue me. Like I said, that's not a trip that we're gonna make every day out to that Walmart, but it's not a trip that you're gonna make all the way out there either. A 45-minute drive once every couple of weeks, not a big deal. You just gotta know this information beforehand. It's gonna help you work out a budget for how much money you're gonna spend on gas, and also just give you the peace of mind of knowing that the things that you do need and want are within a certain radius of your property, and that you will have access to them. What I recommend you do is, once you've decided on a region that you want to live in, I would go and bring up Google Maps of that region, and I'd start dropping a pin on all the different things that you would consider to be essential services. Then you can take however far you're okay with being away from those things and draw that radius circle around those pins. And you're gonna end up with this kind of Venn diagram that covers a big portion of that region. Inside of those radii is where you should be looking for the properties that you want to purchase. And that will basically guarantee that you will always have those essential services that you need for your own survival within a tolerable distance. And also not wasting the limited resources that you have, like money and gasoline, on driving to get stuff. Know what I mean? Ignoring neighborhood red flags. You can tell a lot about the problems that you're going to encounter by taking in as much information as you possibly can about the surrounding area of the property. Now, you can't do much about who moves in or what the area becomes after you buy your property, but before you buy, you really need to be observant and look around, drive around. Check out the roads, check out the other properties that are around, because you might find some glaring red flags are just sitting there ready for you to acknowledge. Let me take you for a little ride and show you what I mean. When we first got out here, there was really only like 5 or 6 other little, we'll call them homestead-ish developments out here in this area. So there was a lot of space between us and anybody else. Then a few years ago, a couple hundred of these properties all sold all at once. And then the following year, 1,000 more, and so on and so forth. Each one of these properties was turned into a commercial pot grow. Now, since government's gonna government, and the local county board decided that they wanted to regulate this activity, they came up with a series of rules. The first one was, well, if you're gonna do one of these pot grows, it needs to be done indoors, thinking that that would curtail the activity, when what it really did was encourage these individuals to come up with a cheap way to accomplish that. In order to comply with the law, they put up these giant hoop houses. So then the local government took another swing at it and said, well, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna have to put up an 8-foot privacy fence all the way around the operation. What they did was put barbed wire fencing up and then take this kind of tarp-like material and string that along the barbed wire. The barbed wire would just rip up the tarp material when the wind started blowing, causing it to shred and the plastic to just kind of fly all over the place. The same thing happened with the hoop houses. The winter weather would come in, collapse the structure, and then all of a sudden all that plastic that was on it would start to deteriorate and then blow all over the place, making a big old mess. And these are the kind of things that reinforce my and a lot of other people's idea that governments are basically the worst at everything, because they are. These folks are only out here during the growing season, and they clear out in late fall and don't come back until late spring. Because they leave their generators and pumps and greenhouses and water tanks and all of the other stuff that they have for these operations, that brings in the chemically enhanced zombie-esque hordes of tweaker thieves that come in and raid all of these different properties. And they steal everything. And since they're not here to deal with it, us full-timers have to. It's pretty horrible, right, Saoirse? Almost as bad as that hairball you keep trying to cough up. It's almost that bad. Now, this happened after we had moved in here and actually lived here for, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. So we try to make the best of it now. But these sorts of red flags can exist in properties that you're looking for at the moment. If you do go out to the property before you buy it, be sure to look around. Is the next door neighbor's property a junkyard? Is the property that's adjacent to the one you're looking at the property that the whole neighborhood uses as a landfill? Are there dark ring, sunken-eyed, zombie-esque marauders bebopping around that you're gonna have to chase away from anything that you find some kind of value in? Are there a bunch of abandoned structures? You catch my drift. These are the sorts of things that you want to keep an eye out for, because if that condition already exists, you probably don't want to spend any amount of your life trying to deal with the things that will happen in that sort of environment. Best to just move on down the road. Remember, cheap land is cheap for a reason, and it's up to you to discover what that reason is, and then you need to decide whether or not that reason is something that you can live with for however long you intend to be spending on this particular property. Pro tip. Check the local news sites, the Facebook pages, next door. See what the local people are actually talking about that area. How do they refer to it? Hi. Did you just want a hug? I love you too. You can also contact the sheriff's department or the police department and find out if the place where that property is going to be is a hotbed for crime. These are just ways for you to gather information about the area so you're not caught off guard by something crazy happening that you just didn't even know about. Which brings us to mistake number 5. Ignoring property access during emergencies. This one could literally be life or death. Ignoring emergency access to your property during storms, snow, fires, or even just for an ambulance to get in to come and pick you up if an accident happens. I see people run into this all the time because they fall in love with that remote, secluded property, and they don't really take into consideration the reality of what if something absolutely catastrophic happens? How are they going to address that? When you're living off-grid, you're further away from emergency services than most other people. The last thing you want is to be completely cut off when you need help the most. I'm talking about situations where ambulances can't come and get you, fire trucks can't get through, and you can't even get out when you need to. So when you're looking at properties, you need to take into consideration access during the worst case scenario situations. Ask yourself, what happens to that dirt road when it's been raining for 3 days straight and it's completely washed out? Do you have a vehicle that could make it through that? Or are you at the mercy of somebody coming and dragging that road for you to even be able to leave your property to get supplies or to take care of an injury if something like that were to happen? Is there only one way in or out? Do you have alternate routes that you can get out if one of the roads is completely washed out? Can you go around the scenic route to get out of the area that you're in? And here's something that most people don't even think about. What about wildfire evacuation routes? How far on the main road getting into that area are you in compared to all the other developed homesteads in that particular area? How are you going to get out when everybody else is trying to get out too? These are all things that you have to consider that most people don't. Most people are worried about, title insurance and whether or not their property has encumbrances. But the truth is, there are things about living remotely that are life or death. And those, I think, should take precedence over anything else. Not that those other things aren't important, because they are. So either walk or drive all the different access routes in or out. Look for signs of flooding. Do the roads get dragged regularly? Talk to the neighbors if you can. Find out about the winter weather. What happens to the roads when things wash out? How long they're usually trapped if they are trapped, either from being snowed in, rained in, or any other type of natural disaster that might keep them on their property and not let them get out to go get supplies. That'll teach you how long you need to have worth of supplies that are shelf stable so that in an emergency situation, you'll be able to feed yourself. Check with local emergency services and find out what their ability to even get to that area is. And then just make sure that you always have a backup plan for how to get out in case of things like wildfires. Here's a pro tip that you might disagree with, because I know the word HOA has seriously negative connotations because you see all of these TikTok videos about people dealing with the HOAs. And in this lifestyle specifically, where you just want to be left alone, it seems like two things that don't go together. But did you know that in certain subdevelopments, especially like on the West Coast, they were created specifically for the purpose of maintaining the roads in and out in case of emergencies? For example, our property here is in a property owners association. We all pay $80 a year, and that is pooled, and then they use that to maintain the roads in and out. I never have to worry about whether or not I can get out or my family can get out if an emergency happens, regardless of me being here or not. That ability to maintain the roads coming in and out is the HOA's only purpose and only power. So it's not always an entirely bad thing if a property has an HOA or a POA. You just have to get a hold of the CC&Rs and read them and find out what they can tell you you can and can't do, and all the things that you might end up finding out are a problem later on. Don't just immediately disregard an otherwise perfect property because it has a POA. Not until you actually read what the purpose of the property owners association actually is. It isn't necessarily a deal breaker, so get a hold of those CC&Rs and read them. You might just find a diamond in the rough, like we did. So there you have it. Those are the 5 biggest mistakes that I see people making when they're searching for cheap, raw, undeveloped land to build their off-grid homestead on. And look, I get it. It's easy when you're dreaming about off-grid living and homesteading and you're on a property and you're looking around and it's just absolutely gorgeous and quiet and you can hear the birds' wings flapping as they fly by, to get caught up in the romance of it all, in the dream, and forget all about all the practical stuff. But these specific things, if you're not aware of and you don't actively try to filter out what you're looking at through that lens, it can cost you thousands of dollars and years of frustration. And I want to help you avoid that. Remember to check out Wayne Turner's videos and Better Together Homestead's videos on mistakes to avoid, because they have a different viewpoint on it. Super valid, really, really valuable stuff. Check them out. Again, they're linked down in the description of this video. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and smash the like button. Or don't, because I'm not the boss of you. I hope to see you in the next one.